third session of first lesson of his oral sources. Oral sources, they consist of folk songs, gatha, shlokas, abhangas, povadas, proverbs, legends, and myths. So we today we'll understand the various aspects or features of folk life of a folk literature, which is passed on from generation to generation. It is orally passed on orally. We did not have any these sources in written form. They are passed from singer to another singer or from one generation to another generation. Now, folk songs. Folk songs originate in a country or a particular region. They are lucid. They are sung in lucid form and they passed from one generation to another. They explain about individual character or about events. They also are in the form of mm, praise to God. Okay, students. So these are folk songs. For example, Ovi, Gavaland, Bharud, they are the folk songs which are passed from one generation to another. Now Gatha. Gatha is a Sanskrit term for a song or a verse, especially referring to any poetic meter which is used in legends. These Gathas are not a part of Vedas or Vedic literature. Now Shlokas. There are different types of different shlokas. These shlokas has to be composed in a specific meter. These shlokas have specific number of lines with specific number of words. Okay. For example, Manache Shlok. You are aware about it. Just find out how many words each line is having. Now, Abhangas. It is a form of devotional poetry sung in a praise of God Vitthal. Understood? So, different sons wrote different Abhangas. Still, they are very famous among common people. For example, Abhangas written by Sant Dhaneshwar, Sant Tukaram, Sant Eknath and Sant Namdev are still famous among people even today. Now Povadas. Povadas are the genre of Marathi poetry that emerged in 17th century in India. It is a kind of ballad written in an exciting style and narrate historical event in an inspiring way. The composer cum singers of povadas are called as shahirs. Proverbs. Proverbs. You are aware about proverbs. There are different types of proverbs which are still famous today. This you can find out or you can even today aware about it from your Marathi lessons or English. Legends. An old story that may or may not be true called as legends. And then next myths. Myths means what? It is a story from past, especially one about gods or men of courage. So these are the oral sources of our literature or and these sources they passed from one generation to another. Now see, this is a povada written to praise the events, historic events of Tanaji. So this is an extract from the povada. It is composed by Shahir Tulsidas Shahir. As I told you, the composer and singer of povada is called as Shahir. What he portrays? He portrays Kundana campaign in it. This povada contains beautiful character, sketches of Tanaji, Shelar Mama, Shivaji Maharaj, Veer Mata, Jizabai. Very interesting. Okay, just write down before writing the exercises. Okay, student. While writing, while evaluating the sources of history, we have to check certain point, points of that sources. These are number one, we have to check the authenticity. We have to check it carefully whether the sources are authentic, whether the sources are genuine or fake by applying the internal standards of history. We have to again check the integrity of writers, whether they are having any political pressures, whether they are personally interact with any historical persons. So we have to check these integrity. Again, we have to check whether these sources rely or depend on hearsay or they are eyewitness accounts. Here we already know that some sources they depend on hearsay like Buckers and some are eyewitness accounts. Again, we have to check whether the written sources they are having the matter which explains with different forms or the what the character in reality, which is different than the reality. Again, we have to check the imagination power of that literature and writer. So after checking carefully, after verifying these sources carefully, we have to again check that about the integrity of writers. We have to, while writing these sources, we have to check one thing or about that writer is that the writer should be impartial. The writer should be neutral while writing the important events of history. When the writer is impartial and neutral, we get all the events. We get idea about the events in correct way. Okay, students? Some important words with meanings. Chronological, the order in which a series of events happened. Authentic means, as I told you, real. Metallurgy, process that is used for the extraction of the metals in their pure form. Inscriptions, words that are written or cut on something, especially on the metal plate, sheets of metal, then rocks, stones, etc. Religious manuscript, this religious manuscript means this text supplemented with decoration, which is having borders, some pictures, painted pictures, etc. Now treatises, a written composition on a particular subject in which its principles are discussed. And the travelogues, a book about travel. Legends. And legends means an old story that may or may not be true. Myths, a story from past, especially one about gods or men of courage. Genuine, genuine means real or true. Exaggerations, exaggerations are it describes of something and making it more than what it really is. Metaphors, it is a word or a phrase that is used in an imaginative way. This is the imagination to show that something has the same quality as another thing. Here we are finishing our lesson.